1787, they signed the Constitution. It's got to go to the states. Okay, there's going to be a big debate over this, right? And focusing really on New York, Virginia, big states that we really need. You need 9 of the 13, but really you want all 13 again. So the people that really came out against this new Constitution, as I talked about yesterday, were anti-federalists. And this is Patrick Henry, guys. He's the loudest voice opposed to this. But he brings up really good points. Some of them maybe not so good. I mean, you guys can judge for yourself. We're, 250 years later, okay, was Patrick Henry right? Okay, after 240 some years, okay? So, has our national government become too powerful? Some would say, yeah. Okay, certainly it does things today that it didn't do for the first 150 years. Okay, and you guys all took history last semester, right? So like up until the Great Depression, the federal government really didn't do that much. And once we hit the Great Depression, guys, the federal government really got involved in our lives. Okay, the other day we talked about the 16th Amendment, the federal income tax. That was 1909. Okay, people didn't have a personal relationship with the federal government. You guys know every day that you guys get lunch at the cafeteria, you guys are having a personal relationship with the federal government because that free lunch, okay, is coming from federal tax dollars, from the Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C. Okay, I'm not sure that's what the founders had intended when they wrote this Constitution, that the federal government would be buying breakfast and lunch for every student in America in our public schools. I'm not sure what they had that in mind. Okay, so now, do we still have our freedoms? Do we still have our rights? That sort of thing. I mean, that's the big one, is your rights, okay? He said that popular government can only exist in small territories. Well, I think democracy, yes, but representative or Republican government has worked pretty well for us, okay? One this large could only be held together by force. Is that true? If you don't pay your taxes, what happens? You could go to jail. But like, I had this happen to a friend of mine when he was like in his early 20s. He got audited by the IRS, and he worked for like a sign company. So he sold signs, okay? But he also knew how to make signs. So like, he would do side jobs. I'm like, hey man, I can hook you up with a sign, and he'd make some money on the side, but he didn't report his income with the IRS, and he got caught. And so they garnished his wages. So before he got paid, the IRS would take money out of his check until he paid back what he owed to the IRS. Okay. I would say in some cases, you guys know what the EPA is? The Environmental Protection Agency. You heard of this? Okay. Now, I'm just trying to give you some examples here of the power the government has over us. New Market Square. Okay, you know where that is, right? Where the Target is over there. Now, when I first moved to Wichita, that was all like just open land. Okay, and it wasn't farmland; it was wetlands. Now, you guys know that Kansas is a huge migratory bird area, right? So birds migrate through Kansas north and south all year long. During COVID, I kind of became a little bit of an avid bird watcher. Okay, I mean, you get bored, right? There's a great Facebook group called Kansas Birding, okay? And because you see, I mean, have you heard of Cheyenne Bottoms out towards Dodge Dodge City, or I think Dodge City, called Cheyenne Bottoms, huge wetlands. And you can go out there pretty much any time of year and see all kinds of like tropical birds that migrate north and south through Kansas. So like I grew up on the beach in Florida, right? And we had these little, what we call little sandpipers running around on the beach. If you've ever been to the beach, just local with these skinny legs, running around, okay? And then I come up here to Kansas, and then I get this coaching job at Carroll, and I'm out working on the field, and I see one of these sandpipers running around the baseball field. I'm like, what the hell is this bird doing up here? Okay, those are beach birds, okay? Well, they migrate through here. Well, over there where New Market Square is, you weren't allowed to build anything there because it was a wetland. Follow me? So even if you own the land, they said you can't build on it because birds use that when they migrate through Kansas. Guys, money talks. Okay? And they said, we've got like all these big businesses that want to open up over here, and we can make like this huge row of businesses be great for economic activity on the west side of Wichita, New Market Square. I mean, look at that place. It blew up, right? 20 years ago, none of that was there. Well, money was able to pay for that and, basically convince the EPA, well, we'll leave some areas that are open, but we're going to build it. And so the money talks, okay? And politicians, right? So you got to talk to the politicians to do that. Well, what if you owned a piece of property and the EPA said you can't build on this because of whatever environmental reason? This happened to my family when my mom and dad bought a piece of property on the water on a bay in Florida. And the neighbor next door had a dock that went out into the bay. The neighbor next door to them had a dock that went out into the bay. Well, we're like, we want to build a dock to go out in the bay. And the EPA said you can't. Because the sawgrass that, you got your land and then sawgrass, and then you got the beach, you got sand. Well, the sawgrass is endangered. And if you build a 4-foot wide deck over that sawgrass, you're endangering the sawgrass. So the EPA says you can't do that. Okay. So private property ownership. Okay. Does the government force us or not allow us to do the things we want to do, to pursue our own happiness, these sorts of things? And sometimes when you give too much power to government, you lose your freedom. Okay. I think the United States today, we're still, I wouldn't say necessarily we're held together by force. Okay. But there are instances out there of abuse by government on its citizens that we need to be, weary of. And we need to push back on, okay? So I think this is a matter of opinion, okay? Okay, now, he also felt like this new executive that we're going to call the president, okay? So we made this up as we went along. They didn't know what they were going to call the chief executive. I know in Britain they used prime minister and they had a parliamentary system, but we settled on president. In fact, it was Hamilton that wanted to name the president king. Okay, so, some people talk about how Hamilton really wanted to make the executive really strong, okay, powerful. This Constitution restrains our president. Okay, the checks and balances do work on our presidents, okay? They have gained power over the years, but has any of our presidents become like a king? Not really. Probably the closest, Franklin Roosevelt, right? He was elected 4 times. And then they passed the 22nd Amendment and said, we're not doing that anymore. Okay, so the system works, you know what I mean? So we've never had, authoritarian president. Now, Joe Biden wanted to pass a mask mandate, right, for all employers, or a vaccine mandate for all employers that had 100 people or more, right? He tried to do that by executive order. They didn't pass the law, he just wanted to do it. The system worked. The Supreme Court said, you can't do that. You follow me? So the Constitution does work, these checks and balances, okay? So no, that hasn't been a thing, but, you know, what is Patrick Henry doing? He's trying to warn people, okay? Let's put in some safeguards. Make sure these safeguards are there, okay? This could be a danger to individual rights and representative government. And this is the big one, guys. If you're taking notes, put a star next to number 3, okay? Because this new Constitution did not contain a list of your rights. Now, if you'll recall from a few lessons ago, I talked about how the state constitutions, it was a green slide. On that green slide real quick. I gotta go back a little further. There it is. Right after the declaration here. Okay, yeah. So many of these state constitutions had a Bill of Rights in them. Okay, so when they wrote the Constitution, they said, well, the federal government doesn't have the power to take away your rights. So the states have bills of rights, so you don't need them. Follow me on that argument? Because all the powers of the federal government are listed. And nowhere in here does it say the federal government has the power to take away your freedom of speech or your freedom of religion. They don't have the power to do that in here. But for Patrick Henry and the anti-federalist guys, that was not enough. They said, we need a list of rights. Okay? So they're going to push for this. And when it's all said and done, guys, at least 3 states, Massachusetts among them, North Carolina among them, will say this: we will ratify this new Constitution if you put in a Bill of Rights. So the reason why we have a Bill of Rights in the Constitution today is because of the anti-federalists. Follow me? Now, the anti-federalists lost when it came to this new Constitution being adopted, but they won for all of us a Bill of Rights that is in black and white, guys. It's in the Constitution. They could not take away those rights. Have those rights been threatened from time to time throughout our history? Yes. I mean, like illegal search and seizure without a warrant. With the NSA spying on Americans' emails, Google searches, and so forth. They have threatened our Fourth Amendment rights. Okay? And there's been pushback on it. Okay? But, and you know, many times in American history, our rights have been threatened. Okay? We go back like World War II, when we rounded up Japanese American citizens and put them in camps without charging them with a crime, suspending habeas corpus, taking away their rights. Okay? We've done this from time to time, usually during a crisis, guys, right? A war, a depression, something, 9/11, okay? You see a threat to your rights. Okay? I think I talked about this before, right? Are you willing to give up some of your rights for security? Or are your rights more important than your security? And that's an individual opinion for all of you, right? I mean, I'm one that believes that you don't give up your Fourth Amendment right to not be seized or searched by the government for security purposes. I don't think the government should be able to spy on us. Okay? Some of you are like, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. I don't care if the government's watching what I'm doing. Okay? I think the more you dig into that, your privacy and so forth is so important. Okay? All right. So, to counter the arguments of the anti-federalists, you get the Federalists, okay? And as I mentioned yesterday, these 3 men, okay, this is Hamilton, Madison, and John Jay, okay? Now, guys, on that homework assignment, I just opened it back up because I was grading those, and I noticed several people did what Snell did the first time, which was answer 3 questions instead of 6 questions. And so you put some time into that, and so I'm not going to give you 6 out of 12. Okay, there's 6 questions. Some of you only did 3. Okay, so if you want to finish that, I opened it back up. You can finish it tonight. Okay. If you don't want to finish it, I just won't give you a grade. You don't want 6 out of 12 in the grade book, do you? Okay. I just won't put in a grade if you don't update it. Okay. All right. Sorry for the confusion on that. All right. All right. So here's what the Federalists counter with. All right. They say, look, they argued that the powers, the separation of branches, and they would check each other. So only the executive can enforce the law. Only the legislative can pass laws, and they control the money. And the judicial branch, well, at the beginning, they're not very powerful. Okay, but that will change. In this way, no one branch will become too powerful. And I just cited some examples of that, right? Where one branch can restrain the other. And this was the argument I just talked about. They said, we don't need a Bill of Rights. Don't need one. Because the national powers are listed, okay? And the states have bills of rights. State constitutions take care of that. We don't need a Bill of Rights. Like I said, that's not good enough for some of the states, right? So we're going to get it. Interesting story, okay? Hamilton. You guys know what he goes on to become the first of after we start the first government? First Secretary of Treasury, right? James Madison. Now, we know he becomes president later on. He's our 4th president, right? But his first job in the government, Speaker of the House. Okay? Speaker of the House of Representatives. As I told you yesterday, there were 65 people in the first House. Today we have 435, right? So he was the leader of the House of Representatives, okay? John Jay, the first Supreme Court Chief Justice. Okay. Now, Madison was a Federalist. He said, we don't need a Bill of Rights. Well, guys, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution are the Bill of Rights. Those amendments have to be proposed by Congress and written by Congress. Guess who writes it? James Madison. Okay, so when they say, okay, look, if you ratify, we promise to put in a Bill of Rights, James Madison will be, in part, the author of those Bill of Rights, even though he opposed them. Does that make sense? So it's kind of interesting, and a good person to have writing these, by the way, right? James Madison to write these Bill of Rights. Okay. And in the next chapter, guys, when we get to chapter 3, we're going to study those checks and balances. We're going to study the Constitution itself. We will learn the amendments, the Bill of Rights, and the other amendments as well. Okay. So I've got a fun exercise that we'll do and learn all those. You probably know some of them already, but we'll learn all 27. Okay. So these guys end up writing the Federalist Papers. Okay. So they send out these papers, or publish them in newspapers in New York. Okay. They do not use their own name on this. Okay. Yeah. So this is what it looked like in the papers in New York. Here's a good picture of it. Okay. So in the press, they're using F's, the letter F for S still. Okay. So like this is a collection of essays. Isn't that weird? Okay. Written in favor of the new Constitution by citizen of New York. Corrected by the author with additions and alterations. Okay. And so they signed this actually Philo Publius. They do not put their names on these essays. Because Alexander Hamilton, guy, he's one of those people that you either love him or you hate him. He has a lot of people. He's arrogant. Okay. And so if they know Hamilton's, it's like this, like, would you read those, like, I hate Donald Trump. How many are going to read a letter that Donald Trump or give a crap what he has to say? I don't like this person. I'm not going to read it. So they didn't attach their names. All right. That's called a pen name, right? Pen name. Good morning. Yeah. So, yeah, and this is going to work. Now, it takes a while. So Delaware, which is the smallest state, population-wise, is the first to ratify the Constitution. Okay, I don't know how old you were when these came out. The state quarters, where they have the quarters with the states on the back, used to just have the eagle on the back, and then they started doing state quarters. So when they started releasing these, they did them in the order that the states became states. So the first state quarter to come out, Delaware. It's our first state. They're the first to ratify the new Constitution. Okay, on December 7th, 1787. Okay. Another important December 7th date in American history. Okay, so the small states are, hey, the Senate is going to protect us. The Electoral College is going to protect us from the big states. Make sense? Now, as I was saying, Virginia and New York are deeply divided on this. And so the Federalist Papers do have some sway with the people of New York, okay? And then when you get people like, Jefferson and Washington pulling for this, of course, Patrick Henry's from Virginia, okay? So these are very important papers, as I was saying the other day, okay? 85. It did help weaken opposition. And the ninth state, which they needed 9, was New Hampshire in June 21st, 1787. So you guys can see this is going to take months to ratify this Constitution. Okay, it's not going to happen overnight. $45? All right. The Federalist 71 that you guys read was about the 4-year term limit for the president. Okay. And just reading through your homework, you guys had some pretty good answers on that. For these people, remember, under the Articles of Confederation, the legislature had 1-year terms. There were elections every year. Okay. 4 years really gives a president time to, somebody that hopefully we trust and we like as president, time to, implement policies that are favorable to the country, and it's not so chaotic. There's time. Okay. I mean, you guys are living history right now, right? I mean, Joe Biden, we will look back on him. You know what I mean? Like, when you guys get older, you'll look back on this presidency. And, maybe you'll scratch your head, but with his age and his cognitive ability, which seems to be waning some, he's really kept in a bubble. And if you notice Biden, he's always wearing a mask. The White House is deathly scared of Biden getting COVID. You understand? Like, if President Biden gets COVID, he could die. I mean, I mean, anybody of that age, right? And of course, he's got the booster and everything. You know what I mean? Like, and there are drugs out there that, some people claim help with this that is not available to the general population. Like ivermectin, hydrochloroquine, these sorts of things that the CDC has said, these don't work. Okay. They have said that there's going to be a new pill coming out as a therapeutic that, of course, is made by Pfizer. Okay. This company is freaking huge. Their profits this year are over $50 billion. And you guys know they have lobbyists in Washington, D.C., right, that are encouraging certain policies. Okay, so that money that they have, the power that they have, influences our politicians. Okay, now I don't know if you heard or not, yesterday, New York dropped their mandates. Okay, and Canada, with the trucker situation up there, at least 2 of the provinces in Canada have said they're going to start dropping their mandates. Okay, so those protests seem to be having an impact. But what was I talking about? I don't know how I got on that. How did I get on that? Yeah, I mean, just looking back at history here. Yeah. I just completely lost my train of thought. Yeah, you are. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to look back. I mean, like I remember Jimmy Carter in the 70s. I was born in 68, and I remember in 76 he was elected. And in 77, I mean, my parents almost went bankrupt. The economy was so bad. Okay, our economy today, really, guys, is not bad. Now the inflation sucks. Okay, but there are jobs out there. I sat in the Taco Bell drive-thru yesterday on 37th and Woodlawn for 30 minutes. They had 2 people working in there, one to register and one making food, and a line of cars. At least 3 or 4 cars pulled out of the parking lot, waiting. Okay, and I get up to the window, and there's a sign on the window that says, hiring adults for $10 an hour, which is, over minimum wage. They don't have people to work there. You know what I mean? So like, I talked about this yesterday, tipping people. That was a different class. I get to the window, and I always pay with my credit card, There's this guy, you can tell, like, he's beaten down, man. This Mexican guy. And people are probably bitching at him, the long lines, the long waits. I could see he was like defeated, So I paid with my credit card. I had a 20 in my pocket. I said, here, have a good day. I mean, it's a tough, so much staffing shortages and so forth. And the government is, sending out checks to people. People don't want to work. I mean, we gotta just like somehow get back to normal. I mean, yeah. So again, I'm off track. I don't even know what I'm talking about. Okay, so this is gonna work. Okay, the Federalist Papers. Okay, and then the next slide. Oh, the next, yeah. So strong recommendations. Yeah, I got it right. Okay, Massachusetts, North Carolina, and Virginia said we will ratify if you put in the Bill of Rights. Okay, and so thank God that happened, and thank God our rights are written down. Okay, the Federalists promised that the first Congress would pass. Yep, and then James Madison did that. Okay, the first Congress is going to meet in New York on March 4th, 1789. Okay, so if you look at the history of the capitals of the United States, first capital was Philadelphia, with the Second Continental Congress and the Articles of Confederation. Our second capital is going to be New York City. And then they will make plans to build a new capital out of the swamps of Maryland. Yes? And how many guys were there for the March for Life? Did you guys go on that? Okay. Yeah. So you went to, that used to be a swamp. Okay. And the highest point in that swamp, there's a hill. It's called Capitol Hill. That's where they put the legislative building. Okay. Giving it prominence over the White House. The Supreme Court, the first Supreme Court, guys, they didn't have their own building. They met in the basement of the Capitol, like an unfinished basement. That's how little we thought of the Supreme Court. John Jay, who I just showed you a picture of, as I said, the first Chief Justice, he quit. He did it for like 3 years. He's like, this is stupid. We don't really have a job. We don't do anything. Okay, because you got to remember, when you learned this last year, in 1803, this court case okay, I'll touch on this next chapter, but remember hearing about this, Marbury versus Madison? Okay, this is what gives the Supreme Court judicial review. The ability to say the actions of the president are unconstitutional, or the actions of the legislature, their laws are unconstitutional. Okay, but they didn't really have that power until 1803. Okay, and that is addressed in one of the other Federalist Papers by Alexander Hamilton, calling the judicial branch by far the weakest of the three. And he was right at the time. After Marbury versus Madison, some would say it's become the most powerful of the three. Because the President of the United States, who's very powerful, wants to do something, the Supreme Court says you can't do that. That's power. Okay? George Washington is sworn in on April 30th, 1789, won all of the Electoral College votes. Okay? And finishing second with no votes was John Adams. Okay? So John Adams will become the vice president. Guys, up until the 12th Amendment, the person that finished first became president, the person that finished second became vice president. Can you imagine Joe Biden being Donald Trump's vice president or Donald Trump being Joe Biden's vice president? Now, you could actually see Mitt Romney being Barack Obama's vice president. And that's something you could actually envision. Okay. Because Mitt Romney's like, he's a moderate. Yeah. And that's why he lost, by the way. When Republicans put up moderates, like John McCain and Mitt Romney, they lose. When Democrats put up very liberal people, they lose. Okay, Joe Biden ran as a moderate. He hasn't governed as a moderate, but he's ran as a moderate. Okay, so you look at the last Republican victories; they were all conservative. Like they stood up for what they believed in. They weren't wishy-washy, like Mitt Romney. Okay. They're not on the fence, in other words. Yes? Get off the fence. So we got George Washington's going to be our first president. No term limits. Yeah. That's it. It's Thursday, right? Tomorrow, I'm going to talk about those. Well, I'm going to talk about Federalist Number 10 because I love to talk about Federalist Number 10. It's very eloquently written by Madison. And Monday, we'll do a review. And Tuesday, we'll take our second test. Good?